Join me as I dive deep into the wildest twists and turns of the Jodi Arias murder case and how it shocked the nation. Jodi Arias is a name that's become synonymous with one of the most infamous murder cases in recent American history. On June 4, 2008, Travis Alexander, a 27-year-old motivational speaker and entrepreneur, was found brutally murdered in his home in Mesa, Arizona. The investigation that followed would shock and fascinate the nation, as the prime suspect was none other than his ex-girlfriend, Jodi Arias. The Jodi Arias case is a complex and intriguing one, filled with conflicting narratives and shocking revelations. One of the biggest challenges in understanding this case is navigating the vastly different versions of events presented by Jodi and the prosecution. On one hand, Jodi claimed she had nothing to do with Travis's murder, while on the other hand, the prosecution presented a mountain of evidence suggesting she was the one who planned and executed the crime. Another challenge in making sense of this case is the sheer amount of evidence that was presented during the trial. From cryptic messages and secret recordings to gruesome crime scene photos and questionable alibis, the trial was a true crime enthusiast's nightmare come true. And yet, despite the overwhelming evidence against her, Jodi maintained her innocence, even taking the stand in her defense. But what drew the public in was the soap opera-like drama played out in the courtroom, the tumultuous relationship between Jodi and Travis, the tears, the tantrums, and the testimony from friends and family members made for a trial that was as much about personalities as it was about the facts of the case. As we delve deeper into the details of the murder, it's impossible not to explore the psychological aspects of Jodi Arias. What drives someone to commit such a heinous crime? Was it passion? Was it revenge? Or was it something more sinister? Jodi's background, her relationship with Travis, and her motivations all play a crucial role in understanding the events leading up to the murder. Travis and Jodi's relationship initially appeared to be a whirlwind romance, one that seemed full of promise and intensity. The two met at a prepaid legal services conference in September 2006, and their chemistry was undeniable. Almost immediately, they began an intense, long-distance relationship, with Travis living in Mesa, Arizona, and Jodi in Palm Desert, California. Despite the miles between them, they spent hours talking on the phone, sending texts, and visiting each other whenever possible. Their bond deepened when Travis, a devout Mormon, baptized Jodi into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This symbolic act strengthened their connection, with Travis believing that their shared faith was a solid foundation for a potential future together. However, beneath the surface, their relationship was riddled with complexities. Over time, the romance turned tumultuous, with jealousy, insecurity, and emotional manipulation playing dominant roles. Jodi was intensely infatuated with Travis, and her feelings quickly escalated into obsession. Travis, on the other hand, began to pull away, recognizing the toxicity of their dynamic. Yet they remained entangled in a destructive cycle. As their relationship deteriorated, both engaged in mind games, and accusations of control and deceit began to surface. Jodi's increasing possessiveness and Travis's attempts to distance himself created a storm of emotional tension. But the question remains: was Jodi's deep attachment to Travis enough to drive her to commit murder, or were there more complex factors at play? One of the most perplexing aspects of the aftermath of Travis's murder was Jodi's behavior, which, in hindsight, seemed both cold and calculated. In the days and weeks following the brutal killing, she acted as though nothing had happened. Jodi maintained an air of normalcy, continuing with her daily routine and interacting with friends and family as usual. Perhaps most shocking was her decision to attend Travis's memorial service, where she mourned alongside his grieving loved ones, offering them words of sympathy and comfort. Her actions suggested a bizarre detachment from the horrific crime she had committed. She even reached out to Travis's family, expressing her condolences and acting as though she was just another friend in mourning. In interviews, Jodi projected innocence, claiming to be devastated by the loss of Travis and showing no outward signs of guilt. However, her facade began to crumble when detectives uncovered crucial evidence months later. A camera hidden in Travis's bedroom had inadvertently captured disturbing images that linked Jodi to the crime. The device, which she had attempted to destroy by washing it in the washing machine, contained photos of Travis taken shortly before and after his murder, as well as an image of Jodi herself. This discovery provided the police with the hard evidence they needed to arrest her, shattering the narrative she had meticulously crafted. Jodi's calm demeanor in light of the heinous crime remains one of the most baffling elements of the case, leading many to question the depths of her psychological state. The trial of Jodi Arias was nothing short of a spectacle, captivating the nation with its blend of high drama, shocking revelations, and emotional intensity. From the beginning, both the prosecution and defense fought fiercely, each side presenting a narrative that sought to explain the grisly murder of Travis Alexander. The prosecution painted Jodi as a cold-blooded, calculating killer who meticulously planned the murder out of jealousy and obsession. They detailed the premeditated nature of the crime, emphasizing her obsessive behavior, the violent manner in which Travis was killed, and the overwhelming evidence tying her to the scene. On the other hand, the defense crafted a story of self-defense, claiming that Jodi had been the victim of years of emotional and physical abuse at the hands of Travis. They argued that the murder was not premeditated, but rather an act of desperation during a violent altercation. Jodi, they contended, had been pushed to the brink and acted out of fear for her life. As the trial progressed, emotions in the courtroom ran high, with both sides delivering impassioned statements and witnesses, friends, and family members of Travis recounting the trauma they endured in the aftermath of his death. However, one pivotal moment stood out above the rest, forever changing the trajectory of the trial and shifting the tide of public opinion. When Jodi took the stand in her defense, it was a move many did not anticipate. Her testimony was filled with intricate details about her relationship with Travis, painting him as an abusive partner while portraying herself as a woman who had been driven to an extreme breaking point. But as she spoke, it became clear that her version of events didn't quite add up. When asked about the murder itself, Jodi claimed that she had no recollection of the actual killing. She described being in a fog-like state, saying that she blacked out during the attack and only came to her senses later, shocked and confused by what had transpired. This declaration left the courtroom in stunned silence. How could someone forget such a violent act? Her claims of memory loss felt convenient to many, especially given the nature of the crime, which involved Travis being stabbed 27 times, shot in the face, and his throat being slit from ear to ear. The tension reached its peak when the prosecution, seeking to dismantle her story, presented a series of graphic and deeply disturbing crime scene photos to Jodi and the jury. These photos, which depicted Travis's lifeless body in horrific detail, were meant to confront her with the brutality of her actions. As the images were displayed, all eyes turned to Jodi, waiting for her reaction. But instead of breaking down in tears or showing any signs of remorse or shock, Jodi remained eerily composed. Her lack of visible emotion in the face of such harrowing evidence was chilling to many observers. While some believed her stoicism was a defense mechanism, others interpreted it as a damning sign of her guilt. For the jury, it was a turning point. Jodi's inability to display any genuine empathy or horror at the sight of the man she claimed to have loved lying dead in front of her was seen as a critical moment that undermined her defense. Many believe this was the moment that sealed her fate, as it became increasingly difficult for the jury and the public to see her as a victim. Instead, she came across as detached, manipulative, and unfeeling, solidifying her image as someone capable of cold-blooded murder. From that moment on, the trial's focus shifted, and the case became less about whether she had acted in self-defense and more about whether Jodi Arias was a remorseless killer deserving of the harshest punishment. The outcome of the Jodi Arias trial was uncertain, leaving the public on edge until the very last moment. Throughout the proceedings, the jury was presented with conflicting narratives, both of which were compelling in their ways. The defense's portrayal of Jodi as a victim of abuse who had been driven to kill in a moment of fear was persuasive to some, while the prosecution's portrayal of her as a calculating and vengeful murderer resonated deeply with others. Each day of the trial seemed to offer new twists, revelations, and moments of high emotion that made it difficult to predict which way the jury would lean. As the trial drew to a close, speculation ran rampant. Analysts and media pundits debated whether Jodi's testimony, her demeanor in court, and the evidence would be enough to convince the jury of her guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The case was further complicated by the fact that Jodi had initially given conflicting accounts of what had happened, first claiming she wasn't at the scene of the crime, then suggesting two intruders had killed Travis, before finally admitting to the killing but claiming self-defense. These shifting stories added an element of unpredictability to the trial's conclusion. In the end, however, the jury reached a decisive verdict. Jodi Arias was found guilty of first-degree murder. It was a moment of intense drama in the courtroom as the verdict was read aloud. Some gasped, others cried, while Jodi herself remained stoic. The jury's decision reflected their belief that the murder had been premeditated and deliberate rather than a spontaneous act of self-defense, as Jodi had claimed. The guilty verdict was met with a range of emotions. For Travis Alexander's family and friends, there was a palpable sense of relief that justice had been served for their loved one. They had endured years of anguish, not only from the brutal loss of Travis, but also from the protracted legal battle that followed. For them, the verdict represented a measure of closure, even if the pain of losing Travis would never fully fade. Many in the public shared this sentiment, feeling that the jury's decision was the right one given the overwhelming evidence against Jodi. However, the verdict also sparked outrage among Jodi's supporters and those who had bought into the narrative that she had been a victim of abuse. They argued that the trial had failed to fully consider the complexities of the abusive relationship Jodi had described and that the media had painted her as a villain from the start. For these individuals, the guilty verdict was seen as a miscarriage of justice, and they continued to rally behind Jodi in the months and years following the trial. Beyond the legal ramifications, the case of Jodi Arias has raised profound questions about the intersection of crime and media and the way we consume and respond to true crime stories. From the moment the case became public, it captured the fascination of millions, with every detail of Jodi and Travis's tumultuous relationship being scrutinized and dissected in the press. Media outlets covered the trial obsessively, broadcasting the most salacious and shocking moments, turning the courtroom proceedings into a form of entertainment. This constant media presence created a narrative of its own, one that at times overshadowed the facts of the case. Jodi's image was manipulated and magnified by the media, transforming her into a symbol of either dangerous obsession or misunderstood victimhood, depending on the perspective. Her every move, from her makeup choices to her courtroom testimony, was analyzed as though it were part of a scripted drama. The intense media coverage of the trial also raises questions about the ethics of turning real-life tragedies into spectacles for mass consumption. At what point does our fascination with true crime stories cross a line? How does this constant exposure to crime shape our perceptions of guilt, innocence, and justice? The Jodi Arias trial was not just a legal battle. It became a cultural phenomenon, one that highlighted society's often morbid fascination with violence and the people behind it. This case has led many to reflect on how true crime media can influence public opinion, sometimes even before a verdict is reached. It also poses the question of whether the coverage of such cases can impact the fairness of the trial itself, as the line between courtroom fact and public perception blurs. Ultimately, while the jury's decision brought some closure, the broader questions about how we process and respond to true crime remain open, leaving much to be discussed in the years that followed the verdict. The Jodi Arias case is a stark reminder that, no matter how sensational or captivating a crime may be, at its core, it's about real people, real lives lost, and real families irreparably damaged. So, what do you think about the Jodi Arias case? Do you think she was guilty from the start, or did you have doubts along the way? Let me know in the comments below.